My name is Karen Gilmer, and I am the director. I go by KJ, and that has been with me ever since the very first time that I designed a costume professionally. But call me Karen. So I'm going to popcorn our illustrious playwright. Who disappeared? Oh, wow.
Sorry, my computer went off.
Okay. So it's your turn to introduce yourself.
Me?
Yes, you.
Oh, hi, I'm Niccole Nero Gaines, and I am the playwright, and I'm from New York. If you care.
So go ahead, Gabby. Popcorn to you.
Oh, I was just waving. I wasn't saying it should be my turn. Hi, I'm Gabby Yearwood. I'm a faculty member in the Department of Anthropology. Karen and I have worked on a couple of other projects together, and I'll be leading the conversation tonight. Looking forward to it.
And then we'll go Samir, and then we'll go in order of appearance according to the production, and then we'll hit stage management last. And I believe that's everybody in the room.
Hi, I'm Samir. I'm a senior at Pitt, and I work as a dramaturg for Black and Blue. So I helped put together the study guide packet, and I came up with the discussion questions for the talkback for Black and Blue.
Hi, my name is Kevin Moore. I'm an actor from Aliquippa, Pennsylvania, living in Pittsburgh, and I played Mr. Thomas.
Hello, I'm Wally Jamal, and is my mic on? Okay, okay, I guess it is. I'm playing Mr. Brian, and I've been acting probably longer than most of you have been alive.
Hi, I'm Josh. I'm from Norfolk, Virginia. I'm a freshman at Pitt, and I played 88 Connors.
Hi, guys. My name is Finley. I'm from Wilmington, Delaware, and I'm also a freshman at Pitt, and I played Officer Mcleary.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lauren. I'm a junior at Pitt, and I was the stage manager.
Hi, everyone. I'm Megan. I am a sophomore at Pitt, and I am the assistant stage manager.
Fantastic, fantastic, fantastic. Welcome, everyone. And I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Yearwood.
Hi, everyone. Want to say thanks again for the opportunity to sit and talk with you, and I'm sure your audience will enjoy the questions and answers that you have in terms of your experience being a part of this very timely and really wonderful production. And so I'm gonna start right in with a part of the play that I think hinges on a lot of the tension that we see in the room between the four protagonists throughout the scene, and it involves something that doesn't happen on scene, which is the hug. So if you could all talk about what you think the hug meant between the mom and the police officer.
Let's start with Mr. Brian.
Well, from Mr. Brian's standpoint, I mean, he knows this woman longer than anybody involved in this case. And I'm sure this is not the first outburst of love and forgiveness that she's exhibited in front of him. He probably didn't want it to happen in this particular time. And his demeanor in this entire thing kind of, says that with his insistence upon him having this meeting without her there, because he wasn't coming there to be nice. He wasn't coming there to hug anybody. And that's why when I explained that she said she didn't know she was going to do that, but the Lord so moved her, was my way, or Mr. Brian's way of dismissing that. Like, don't let that, don't get it twisted. just because she hugged you don't mean that all is good, you know, and that's why she ain't here, because now you're dealing with me, you know. And so I mean, personally would say I would look at that gesture far differently than anyone who witnessed it from Mr. Bryan's POV.
Thank you. Let's hear from Officer Mcleary.
Hi. Well, I think the hug from the perspective of the woman, it's kind of a show of her faith in a way, you know, the belief that we have to be forgiving and accepting, and that's kind of showing through her actions that she wants to do what she believes is right, even though she doesn't maybe want to really forgive him. But from the perspective of the officer and the court and the administration, that hug in the courtroom is exactly what they needed to spin the story for the public. Say, look, well, she forgave him, so you should all forgive him too, and we should sweep this under the rug and never talk about it again.
Good. Mr. Thomas.
Yeah. From my perspective, just as a person and, you know, approaching from the character, it was a lot for me because it brought up a lot of stuff, specifically, you know, like the Botham Jean case, where a police officer, you know, went into the wrong apartment that she thought was her home, and she shot and killed the guy, Botham Jean, in his apartment. And at her sentencing, his brother hugged her, and everybody was like, "What are you doing?" You know, it's like, how can you do that? And it's like, on one hand, I get it, because like that family, like the Jean family, they, you know, like had an experience that like I can't even put myself in that position of, because I didn't go through that. So whatever like healing or, you know, like that they need to do through, you know, the grieving process, like that's up to them to decide. Like I can't, as an outsider, say, wow, this person, whether it be, you know, like that real situation or this situation, this story, I can't, you know, like say whether it was right or wrong for them to hug them. But like there's also like that thing that comes into my mind of, you know, like we live in such a time where optics matters. So whether it was just for, you know, like for, you know, Mrs. Bryan's personal healing and her getting over like the trauma of her son being shot, you know, like just the optics of, you know, like this Black woman hugging this white police officer who like shot her son, like that matters. But then it's like, I still, you know, from my outside perspective, how much does my perspective on what another person who goes through a trauma and their experience, how much weight does that have? And like, how much, you know, burden does she have to, you know, be a role model or an advocate for her trauma because of, you know, like all of the combined trauma that, you know, Black people in America go through. So that was a long-winded way of me saying it's very layered and complex. And it's a lot. It's heavy.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you. And let's hear from Mr. Reed, ADA Connors.
I think for me, you know, looking at the character as a whole, and I think all these characters in this play are kind of symbolic of larger stances that we as an American populace have. And I think ADA Connors and Officer Mcleary kind of represent this larger feeling of a lot of Americans wanting to move past something without truly fixing it, without truly addressing it, without truly, you know, identifying what these issues are, and not only how we as individuals can fix them, but how we as a collective can fix them. Because we can't be like an ADA Connors who, you know, just wants to, I think he sees the hug as leverage. This is his opportunity to, like Finley was saying, like to put this under the rug, to say, oh, look, we're past this now. And I think, you know, how he views it and how a lot of people that he represents view this as the hug or one individual instance as, okay, we're past, this is a singular event, but it's not. I think it's this one event in this play, and the characters that represent it are indicative of a longer ongoing struggle that we have to, you know, deal with. We can't push it under a rug.
Right. Thank you. I'm going to extend this question to the playwright. Playwrights put words and situations in their plays for a reason. So just to extend on the question, what prompted you to put this particular act of forgiveness into your play?
Well, I was thinking about the Jean case when I wrote it, because when that happened, I truly didn't understand how the brother could hug someone that had killed his, but it's like Kevin said, it's the optics of it, and we can't really judge someone else on what they do and what's part of their process. So in writing it, I wanted to open up the conversation further, and also like why, and I do think that that was part of her process of getting over the fact that her son has been shot, he's paralyzed, and she's grateful that he's not dead, to be honest. You know, so the hug is almost a like relief. Don't do anything else. Like, if we can be this benevolent and this forgiving, maybe you all will, you know, stop. Like, I feel like she was doing that for the public as well as for herself, to say, you know, like Black, like just to show like we're not, you know, these violent criminals that you think, because so that was going to be displayed throughout. Like, she knew that that was a moment that probably was going to be seen, and in a way, like, to help the community and the cops, I suppose, to just kind of come together in her mind, you know, which her husband didn't like, as we know. But that's what I was doing. I did have the Jean case in mind, and I really just wanted, I'm still trying to understand, you know, how someone, you know, how we are just such forgiving people all the time after it doesn't really work. So that was part of it.
Gotcha. Thank you. Dr. Yearwood.
Thank you all. Those are great responses. And I want to continue to sort of move in that direction, because it's pretty clear that the two sides of what would be the table, there are very different opinions about the hug and why they're there and what they hope to accomplish. So the other piece connected to, I think is connected to the hug, is that justice comes up a lot in the play, and there seems to be a lot of disagreement about what justice is supposed to be and look like. So if you could all talk again about what you think justice means for your character in this play.
You guys want to go first? Because I got a lot to unpack.
Let's start with Officer Mcleary.
Well, I think justice to kind of both sides means, I mean, obviously something very different, but I think for, you know, the side who's arguing the case, who's arguing for the victim in this case, is not just seeking justice for this one person, but is seeking systemic change to stop incidents like this from happening again and again and again. Whereas the other side, the side that my character is on, is trying to not only paint this as an isolated incident, we don't need to talk about it anymore, it happened, it's done, what have you, but also trying to paint this not as an active, somebody went out and hurt this person on purpose, but as this was just an accident that happens when you're a police officer. It just happens, and there shouldn't be a punishment for it. He didn't mean to. So what my character at least, is seeking justice for my partner, the cop, whereas obviously his family is seeking justice for his son.
Thank you. Mr. Moore?
Yeah, thanks. I think for Mr. Thomas, and for me specifically in my life, but for him, I think he's coming from the position of justice is specific. Justice means actionable steps. Justice means you've done wrong. Now you need to restore the person and make them as close to whole as possible. Justice means taking responsibility and accountability for your actions. And being that he's this attorney, you know, like he plays within this realm, and it's not like, okay, this is the game that y'all play. So I'm here to make sure you follow the rules that you laid out at the start of this, you know? So like that means for everybody, not just the black checker pieces, you know, like the other ones too. So it's like when we like justice, like right and wrong is so nebulous, like such nebulous ideas. So it's like, okay, well, what can we do when this crime happens? This is what you typically charge people. Are we doing this now? You know, it's like, and really like holding people to the fire, holding like even, you know, like his contemporaries, like the ADA, you know, like accountable. So like, and that's what it means. Like justice, like that's where I think what his definition of justice is, and like where he's coming from with it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Let's go to Mr. Reed, ADA Connors.
I think for me, the thing that really made me excited about hearing about this play and really excited once I got to be a part of it was growing up. Like I remember in the first grade getting the JMU university like criminal justice textbook in the workbook and working through that. And like I remember like growing up, I wanted to be like a detective. And then because everything seems so simple when you're a kid. And then as you grow older, and now I'm studying political science, it's like you realize over time it's not so simple and cut and dry, and there's so many, you know, issues that, you know, are not simple and are complex. And I think a lot of that, when we talk about ideals that this country is based upon, you know, justice is one of those, but we haven't had justice. You look at the founding of America, it was only a tiny subsection that even got to participate in it. So when we look throughout the entire history of America, when we look at these idealistic virtues, we're just finally maybe getting to the point where we're actually starting to consciously care about those ideals and making them a reality instead of just saying, oh, this is what we base ourselves upon. So I think, you know, justice, I think, is one of those biggest virtues that we have to cope with now, because it means something different for, I think, both sides of the table in this play in particular. Because I think ADA Connor's idea of justice is peace, and whether that means actual justice is achieved and people, you know, are punished for actions that they commit. It's just getting this over and done with, when that's not necessarily what justice is.
Interesting. Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Jamal, Mr. Bryan.
Yeah, well, for Mr. Bryan, I would imagine in this piece that he is the oldest person in the play, where he has seen the most amount of life through the eyes of a Black man in America. And I'm certain he's contended with his own amount of racism growing up, and that he would see that he will have seen the evolution of racism in America, that it never went away. It just changed in this way, and it ebbed in this way and flowed in this other way. And he figures the path that he has chosen, regardless of those ebbs and flows, he should be safe. That he's taking the path of the Lord, that he should be blanketed, and that if the justice system can't protect a preacher's kid, then what's the point of being a preacher's kid? What's the point of being a preacher? What's the point of being good? What's the point, you know, of not just going out and just shooting any person that don't look like you or looks like you? Because you're not protected by it. You don't feel as though you are. And I'm certain that that's how Mr. Bryan felt. It's like, these cops are not saying, this assistant district attorney are not saying that he was caught without a license. They didn't say he committed any kind of crime. Therefore, he is the innocent victim. Okay, from the preponderance of the evidence produced in the play, that they had nothing bad to say about the boy, other than it was an accident, shot in the back. And that's enough to make this preacher, you know, motivated to act on his own. And that's where at the beginning of it, he's going in his idea against his own principles by not including his wife in this little meeting here. And that he knows she's gonna be mad at him. He's asking for forgiveness for her to forgive him. When he, you know, because like when I'm first reading the play, I'm like, well, you know, she hugged the cop. She's full of forgiveness. I'm like, oh, right. I'm hoping she forgive me. You know, God, help her to forgive me for what I'm doing. You know, and so he's going against the grain that his norm, because of this idea of what is the point? Why can't my kid walk down the street? I mean, his drawers are clean, everything clean. He clean, he's polite, he's nice. Why can't he be protected like them white kids in the white neighborhood? What? Because he's in this neighborhood and they're all snakes. And we don't have time to point out the poisonous ones from the harmless ones. Let's just shoot them all. I mean, that's what he's coming at them with. Some serious helplessness from someone who understands his rights as a naturalized citizen of this country, descended from slaves, people that built that built it. And I ain't say it.
Don't get us flagged on YouTube.
Right. It's, but you know, and he was still somewhat subdued in his approach, because he does want justice served. He still does believe in some semblance of justice, or else, you know, he'd be, you know, strapping up like Rambo, you know, and I'm certain he's mad enough too, that he's willing to face the wrath of his wife, you know, for not including her. I mean, she seems like a very emotional person, in that you just got to get out of her way when she's forgiving somebody, you know, just get out of her way, just let her do it. He says she starts everything off with prayer. She's an extremely spiritual woman, and when you know women like that, and I do, you got to get out their way and just let them be spiritual, and you know, because they got a lot to share, and it's all love. You know, it's like Aunt Bunny, you know, you know, I could just see her in that courtroom hugging, look, you poor man. I know that your soul is hurting right now. I know your soul's hurting. Come here, boy, you know, and I know, I mean, I got aunts and, you know, grandmothers and, you know, just black women that I know that in the church that can forgive you for almost anything, and hug you and give you a sloppy old kiss. And that's what these cops, the assistant DA, they saw as like an opening, you know, and Mr. Bryan's seen it. That's why he's kind of perturbed with, like, yeah, y'all keep talking about that, you know, that hug, you know, I just wish she hadn't done that at that time. I'm not going to fault her for, you know, her forgiving and loving spirit. I can't. But just if she just did it at another time, you know, it would make this a little easier. You know, yeah, my wife ain't liking y'all either, you know. But it's hard to say that.
Thank you. Dr. Yearwood.
I didn't know if we wanted the playwright to
Oh, yes.
on this question.
Yes.
Oh yeah, that's fine. I don't have to chime in though, Dr. Yearwood, on everyone, but this I think there is like I think justice in America. There's two justice. There's one for us, and then there's one for everyone else. So like that's why some of the dialogue included. Well, if someone else did it, regardless of whether you're wearing a badge or not, you're held accountable to what you've done. Like justice for all, not it's cops aren't exempt. If anything, like you said, they should be held to a higher standard. So I really was trying to point that out in the play that it's not that, like people always say, oh, well, like, well, justice will take care of it, like, the judicial system. And now we see the systemic racism that goes on, and that word is being used a lot so everyone knows. And that's just kind of what I wanted to bring up. Like, well, if it's justice, then if someone shoots someone who's unarmed, they go to jail, period. It doesn't matter if they're a cop or not. And that's not really getting through to the ADA, who's supposed to be on the victim side, and definitely not to the cop, of course, which it should, so that's part of the reason why I put that in there.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Oh, wonderful responses. This next question is a little bit more about your process as actors in this role, and sort of how you move towards the characters that you had to play. And throughout the play, there are definitely moments of anger, frustration, I'd even say rage, that you have to express. And even given the virtual format, it comes across pretty substantially. So I guess what I'm asking is, what did you use to generate the anger and frustration for your character? What did you reach into or think about in order to make sure that character was true to who they would be in those particular moments?
Well, it's easy for me. I'm like Bruce Banner. I'm always angry about something. So it's easy to channel it. But on a more serious note, I have a 24-year-old son who was shot in Homewood. And it wasn't by cops. It was by his friends, so-called friends. And friend or foe, when your child is hurt and he couldn't walk for a month, and that's pretty much what I kept envisioning while I was, channeling Mr. Brian, just the sight of my son, regardless of who did it. Somebody hurt my child like that is, pretty much what I was halfway bringing to it.
Mr. Thomas. Ms. Moore.
Yeah. Honestly, everything. If I'm being completely honest, everything. Life, like, I listen to a lot of news and stuff, and like this is an everyday occurrence. Like everybody's like, being that we're in lockdown, everything, and coronavirus, the pandemic, and all that stuff. They're like, well, 2020 has been a really big year for like protests and marches for like social injustice, and that's true. But this has been going on forever. Like forever. Like we hear these stories every day, and then we get upset about them, and then no one gets charged, no accountability gets held, and then we move on to the next one, and then we repeat the cycle. And honestly, like it's it is draining. So like a piece like this is like all those like frustrations, like getting it out. Like it's a lot of the thoughts that like I share about a lot of these, situations where unarmed Black people face police brutality. So it's just constant, So it's like almost like the Mr. Thomas character for me was just like a nice cathartic way to like respond to like all the like Twitter trolls and people were like, whoa, what about his record? Or let me pull up this picture of him smoking a blunt 8 years ago. You know, it's like stuff like that. And it's like we can play like the, you know, like the tit for tat game, but at the end of the day, someone got shot, someone got killed, somebody's family got broken because of this. And like in this, and like again, like, and this is just pervasive, like it's all the time. So it's unfortunately something that's always just like below the surface. So it wasn't like when I read this play the first time through, I immediately, you know, was able to tap in and know where Niccole was coming from with this, because it's, you know, like this is reality. Like it is, you know, like it's, I don't think it was unintentional that show started with, you know, like images of headlines, because it's like legit from the headlines, you know, so.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Mr. Geis as Officer McLeary.
Well, I mean, it was a little bit different for this one, especially because I had to, you know, argue on a point I did not personally believe in, and to do that, I have uncles and cousins who are police officers, and I tried to, I guess, try to see the world how they would see it and try to argue from their perspective. And within not just police officers, but within most citizens is that implicit bias to trust law enforcement, to trust those in power. There's actually been studies done that when police are charged with a crime, that juries convict them less because they view them as trustworthy, because that's how we're told to view police. So I feel like my character is just innately trusting of my partner. I know him personally, so I don't think that anything he does wrong is on purpose. I think he made a mistake, and I don't want him to, he's lost his job. I don't want him to have to go to jail over what I view as a mistake, an innocent mistake he didn't intend to make. So even though, and I feel like also my character is very uncomfortable hearing about this terrible thing that the Bryans have had to go through, because the only way he can wrap his head around this is to focus completely on his friend and not think about the other lives that have been destroyed by this event. So I kind of tried to channel that feeling and that emotion for that.
Before, I just want to say something about, from a director's point of view, about casting for Officer McLeary. Officer McLeary does not say a lot, but his presence is very important. And one of the things that Finley brought to his audition and to this character was an insane way that he uses his eyes. And I think that for me, and I didn't even realize it until he auditioned, that this is exactly what this presence needed to be. It wasn't necessarily a big guy or a gruff guy or anything like that, but it had to be a guy who you really didn't know what was going on underneath the surface. And Finley,
can I just say I agree? I thought the same thing.
Yeah, and it surprised me at how much I wanted that for this role, that the role needed that. So, and I love when Niccole chimes in and validates my decisions. It's important because because then I know that I just followed the playwright's intention. And playwright's intention for me as a director and as a costume designer is very important. And with a playwright who's no longer with us, you can't ask those questions, but we had the luxury of having the playwright with us to ask those questions and to get closer to her vision for this piece. For me was one of the most important things. And I will just say that what Finley brought to this role, I felt that that was where she was going with that. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. And I thought Finley did a great job. Even like you said, he didn't have a lot of lines, but his face, my son was saying, look at his face the whole time. So intense. He looks so mad. Like you just stayed in character, which is great. You know, actors should always. And you did. Like you know, we all noticed. I mean, everybody really did a great job. I think the two harder ones were obviously 88 Connors and Officer Mcleary, only because the type of persons that they are, you're probably going to find people who weren't like that. So they had to channel something like Finley said with his, you know, with his uncles and other people. And then, you know, Joshua, like being an ADA and playing an older person. I thought that, you know, I mean, I'm not trying to give everybody critiques, but I'm just saying, like, I thought everybody did great. You know, I wanted Wally from the beginning. As soon as I saw him, like, you know, it's perfect. And then, and Kevin, you know, you had one, you got really upset at one point. My son burst out laughing, and I'm like, "What are you laughing for?" And he's like, "He was so intense." He's like, "It almost made me uncomfortable." But I'm like, "Well, you know, you should maybe should be a little uncomfortable. Like, it's not, you know, he has every right." And he's like, "Well, no, I'm not saying they shouldn't, but it's just he's acting, and you know, he's just so intense with it." So, you know, you all did a great job.
It's an actor's goal to make you feel something, make you remember these words. You know, that's what you got to do. It's a job to be not you, to be someone else. That's an actor's job. When I teach, the first question I'll ask a student is, what would it take for an actor to play you? And the room just gets so silent every time, because that's when a person stops and they really think about themselves, you know, their self. And that's when the exploration can begin. When you know who you are, you know who you aren't, and you know what you got to explore. And this was quite a challenge and an exercise, I would imagine, for you young fellas, because it's delving into emotion and some situations that I'm certain, you know, life has sheltered you from.
And I want to actually thank you, Mr. Jamal, because I want to bring Mr. Reed into this, diving into an experience of an older man that you just don't have. So what was your process for your approach to this character?
Well, my approach for this was a lot from a background in comedy and learning to act a lot more instinctually. That this was one of the first, you know, non-musical theater, like purely dramatic roles I really got to do. So finding a way, I think, because part of that was, you know, tapping into the experience of somebody who is a lot older than me. And I used a lot of different people that I knew in my personal life. Like I used the principal of my school, who's, you know, he kind of has that air about him. He's very professional. He's very, you know, I've never seen him not in a suit. So I embodied that. But I think a lot of it was, like you were saying, exploring feelings, because in a way I saw this as like, this could be me if like I go down like a dark path, because like I'm obviously like I'm young and I don't know what I want to truly be in life. Hopefully it's because, you know, this is what I love. There's kind of like a crossroads of two things that political science, the reason why 88 Connors is where he is at. So I'm using a lot of people. My professor watched speeches of Mitch McConnell, a lot of his facial, because a lot of it being on Zoom, a lot of that facial, because Officer Mcleary gets to, you know, show some emotion, but it was tough, you know, having to try and suppress, because he's kind of like, he has something to lose in this situation. You know, he's in like a position that he's been appointed to, you know, he kind of has to feel like he has a sense of leadership. So like, even if there's a moment where like he's upset, he can't really show he's upset. He has to do like he has to, I think a lot of it was just a lot of figuring out what this character thought opposed to what my thoughts on the world were. And, you know, trying to bring that out in facial expression, because that's really a lot of what had to happen with the format. But it was a cool moment to, like, while I said, like, to explore, you know.
Thank you. Dr. Yearwood.
Thank you all so much. That was more than I could have anticipated. Thank you for sharing, honestly and genuinely for your audience. I think they will very much appreciate what you all just said. I have one last question, and it's a really long question, so it's kind of why I've left it for last. And so, if I have to repeat it, I will. But I think there's a gender dynamic that is implicit and also explicit in this entire play. The room is all men. And so the only woman that gets referenced is Mrs. Bryan, but who doesn't appear in it, but she factors into the conversation that happens. But I think there's also a larger conversation about when these events happen in the real world, that there are a lot of women, queer folks, trans folks, Tony McDade, Breonna Taylor, who are also suffer at this violence. But a lot of times the conversation focuses around George Floyd. And so where do you think gender plays into this play? Where do you think this could have looked differently if women or queer or trans folks were a part of this play or as characters? And how do you think things might have been different or the same, depending on who else may have been in the room?
Can we start with Mr. Finley? I'm sorry, Mr. Officer Mcleary, otherwise known as Mr. Finley.
Well, I think it definitely does play a role, even if it's just implicitly in the minds of these characters and they're not actively thinking about it. But we do live in a patriarchal society where, whether we like it or not, we do view men as kind of the default. Men are the default, and then women, like, being a woman is a character trait, kind of, as it's seen. Being a man is normal. Being a woman, oh, that's a trait. That's a new thing. Whereas, so I think that I don't know where I'm going with this. I think that we view violence incidents towards women differently because we kind of view that there must be something else going on. There must be like or an element involved in this that relates to sex or gender. Maybe it's a jealous ex-boyfriend. Maybe that's why. Whereas with men, we kind of assume that it didn't have something to do with that personally. And like I could kind of speak to this myself. I'm a trans guy. I was assigned female at birth, and I have been the way I've been treated in public has changed dramatically since I started passing as a male. People treat me with more respect. People are always complimenting me on how polite I am, which never happened before because I guess for women it's just expected that you be polite and kind to those around you. So I think that we do perceive those two sides very differently, and that I think does play a role in how we view violence against one and violence against the other.
Thank you. Mr. Jamal, you wanted to say
something next? Definitely. And to piggyback off of that, yes, there is a way that, males are seen quite different than females, and with respect, as you had been getting, it's also the fear of a male as opposed to a female. I've seen Black females punch a cop in the face and still go home. Let a Black man flinch like he gonna do it, and he going in a bag, and that fear is real. Okay, and there's no getting around that. And that's, when you hear these cops after killing an unarmed Black man, you hear them actually say the words, "I was scared." If you were scared, what the hell you doing with the gun or the badge or the authority? Because you're too scared to use it correctly, then you don't need to have it. And to go back to what I was talking about earlier, like about Mr. Bryan coming up, seeing different forms of racism. Like when I was a teenager, I lived in the projects, St. Clair Village, and my mom was very community oriented, and it was like being a preacher's kid. You know, just everybody knows your mom. And so she, to keep us out of trouble, she arranged for us to go and play basketball down the south side of the Market House with the number 7 police. And they would come up to St. Clair Village through the projects and in a van, and we would all get in this paddy wagon and they take us away. And then a couple of hours later, they'd bring us back. See, and that was the difference between the cops then and the cops now. The kids now and the kids then. Kids now, if that was to happen, if some cops were to go to the hood, pick up some kids and take them to play basketball, whatnot, they'd get shot once they got home as snitches or what have you, because it's a different world. But it's that different world that's got white people even more scared than ever, especially when they learn more about Black history. They learn more about why Black people should be pissed off. They learn more every day. With the more they learn about Black history, they're like, oh yeah, that's pretty messed up. Oh man, what else did we do to them? And these are things that are going to have to come to the surface before they can be quelled. They got to be addressed. And a lot of the ideas and attitudes that people have towards Black males are what they have gained over the years, being taught to fear them, being taught to discredit them. And the more they learn about, because all I learned growing up in history about Black people was that we were slaves. I had no idea that there were free Black people from the first days of America. There were free Black people. There was a Black man in the 1840s ran for vice president of the United States. Black man. He was the head of the all white congregation. He was Black as my shirt. It is a weird time. And the less you know about it, the more you're going to lean towards the stereotypes that you're taught. And part of that stereotype is to fear them. Be afraid. He's going to get her. He's going to get your sister, the fear mongering. And you got a guy with a gun with all that fear in him. And I don't even know him. I crack jokes for a living. But he looks at me as this mandingo that's going to kill him and rape his sister. And that's what we got to deal with.
So let me get a couple more voices in here because we're running out of time. Let's see, Mr. Reed.
Well, I think it's I had the privilege of, my mom is a lot of, inspiration for me, because she's worked her butt off her entire life to get to the top of her field. And I've seen so many times in it, and I think a lot of it, like her being discounted just because she's a woman. And like, it's like, I can look at my mom, it's like, I know she's smarter than you, and you're the one, a man saying, oh, you're not as good as ... And getting to see that my entire life has been, part of, what drives me to want to help fix some of these things. And I think a lot of what I kind of put in the 88 Connors is that he's from a different time. He's from a time when women didn't have the roles that they have now, where they can be, have a career, have a life, actually be allowed to be human beings. And 88 Connors coming from a different world. I mean, when the people were marching in Charlottesville, they were chanting, "They will not replace us." And I think that's the mindset of a lot of people, maybe like 88 Connors, or a lot of people who side with these things because they feel like the way that they have always lived and America has always been is changing. I mean, it's changing for the good. Obviously, there's a long way to go. But I think that, that parallel between masculinity and femininity and the power construct that is always present there, I think that's one of the very interesting things that goes on in this play and things we need to think about, because I mean, it's a lot to think about. It's a lot to contemplate, and I think it's something that is very, very important that we need to address. Not just, I think I'm sorry, I'm trying to gather my thoughts here. A tough part of it is I try to emphasize, I'm neither of those things. I'm not, I'm a white man. As much as I try to emphasize or try to educate myself, there will always be that level of I don't know. So I think trying to approach these situations with understanding and educating yourself as much as possible, I think is a necessary.
Thank you. Mr. Moore, wrap us up. Let's take it home.
Well, I'll try to be brief, but I personally think we do not live in a society that respects women. I think we live in a society that thinks we respect women, but we don't actually. And then if you put a Black identity, a queer identity, a trans identity, any other identity on top of that, that just further adds to the invalidation to those identities that are constantly persistent in this country. The fact that this is 4 men in the room talking, I think it's just, reflective of America and the fact that every decision that we make, it has to be passed through the hands of a man, and like, look at Kamala Harris, like when she was running for president, we didn't think she would be a good president. But now that she has a white man as her superior, she's a great VP, So it's like, that's not lost on me. Megan Thee Stallion got shot and we're all like, well, what did she do? Well, why didn't she go to the police fast enough? So it's like, we just like hold women and femme identifying people to a standard that men rarely hold themselves to. With men, we understand our nuances and like, well, this is a different situation, or like if you think about it in this context, but for women, we look at them to be a paragon of, like politeness, of gentility, of, softness, of femininity. And that is like, and it is obvious that like the characters in this play are using like Mrs. Bryan, like as a prop, like to an extent to say like, well, she does, like she forgives us, so why can't everybody, and if a Black woman can forgive, the world can forgive. And, like that's, like it does a disservice, not only to that person, but all those people with those identities as well. So that's just my little nutshell rant, I guess.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Dr. Yearwood.
Well, I just once again want to thank everyone, one for all your brilliant performances, and for sharing so honestly and genuinely, and for indulging my questions. But I just want to say thank you again, and it's great to spend some time with you all.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, you too.
Yes, thank you all. Can I just say, Karen, because I just want to say, the reason why I did make it all male, because I think that the Black women is always in the forefront. Like if her son gets shot or something happens, and originally I was going to make it the mother, and I talked to 5 Black men and they said, no, make it the father. You have to be father. I'm not watching. But, and because a lot of times when something happens, we do see the woman coming, or even on the press conferences. So I just thought, and I wrote this before, Jacob Lawrence, where his dad was the one really speaking out for him when he got shot. So I just thought it wasn't, so it's ironic that same thing, but it's just important to have the Black male's voice when it's I mean, of course, Black women are victimized as well, but Black men are like a target in America. So we just have to protect them, you know, and bring light to what they're going through. That's all.
And I think, and just from a directing point of view, I think that this is and I think Dr. Yearwood was alluding to it in one of his questions, is that this is a room full of men and in different states of rage that we are eavesdropping in on a conversation that women are not a part of. And we get to hear that sort of rawness and that that passion coming from men, which we don't see very often. So that's my little spiel. So I just want to thank everyone from the bottom of my heart, from the playwright to the stage management to Samir, who put together an incredible study guide that encompasses all that we have talked about. So I would like to conclude this talk back of Niccole Nero Gaines's world premiere of Black and Blue. Thank you.